So first of all, thank you for those of you that have taken your time to join us in this four-part series webinar that we've been doing around EV charging stations. The goal of Blue LEV has been really to try and create as much awareness around the process of adopting this technology at your facilities. We've selectively gone through and as a team tried to determine what the most relevant topics are. So the way that we get there is to talk amongst each other and just try to determine what sorts of questions seem to be coming up most frequently. And this webinar, again, is not designed necessarily to be industry specific. There are obviously certain kinds of industries that are more progressive than others in the adoption, but really trying to focus on what's important to our entire audience of customers and clients and so forth that we serve. So our last webinar was around return on investment. That's an important topic. We're actually on, this is part 4 of 4. So those of you that have been with us since the beginning, we try to roll these out about every other month, and we'll continue to make that commitment around education and awareness. So today's topic is we need an EV charging station plan. People are really starting to ask about it. Stay ahead of the competition. What makes this relevant for us is the majority of all the folks that come to us are asking exactly this question. Do we do it now? Do we wait? What are the logistics in doing it? They'll share with us typically where they're getting pressure, either from their tenants, from their employees, from people that might be occupying various facilities and spaces. We may be working specifically with an industry that is had mandates for the adoption. There may be legislation that's driving the need for this sort of thing in new construction. So between the three of us, we're going to try to give you an idea as to how we get our client prepared to have this plan that we're referring to. Next slide, Nick. The look on this woman's face is probably a little dramatic, but this is the this is the type of situation that we find. Are you feeling the pressure from people asking about EV charging stations and need a plan for successful implementation? Most, if not all of our clients, so that you don't feel alone, in the consideration of all of this, they come to us with a very moderate understanding of what to do next. And that's really where Blue LEV establishes itself, initially to be a consultant. But as time progresses and we start to learn more about, the site and their expectations and their situation, becoming more of an advisory group around all the things that we do to help create this plan. Next slide, Nick. So quick introductions. Each time that we do these, we try to, obviously have representation from the Blue LEV team, but we also make the effort to bring somebody from industry, a partner, somebody from the policy side potentially, or somebody from the energy side. So quick introductions. My name is Scott Swiderski. I'm the CMO for Blue LEV. I do and involved in a lot of our marketing efforts, but I also understand, I think, the relationship between what our customers looking for and that of what we ultimately end up delivering for the expectations of that client.
My name is Nick McNulty. I'm the director of our client success team here at Blue Whale. Our team is intimately involved with every project that comes through the Blue Whale organization. We're involved from the very early stages from an education standpoint, all the way through a successful implementation of EV chargers and rebate assessment and collection at the end of the project.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Randy Etman. I'm Senior Director of Sales here at Blink Charging, and it is certainly my honor and privilege to be a part of this webinar with Blue Whale EV. We certainly value the partnership that we have with Blue Whale EV, and as a manufacturer, we are here to support our partners in these sorts of endeavors and help delivering the message and the value of what Blue Whale is able to deliver to clients. I myself have been in the EV space space for a little over 10 years. So I have seen this industry grow from where it was in its infancy stages back in 2013 when I started to where we are today. And it's just been an amazing trajectory to watch this industry grow and certainly be a part of it with partners such as Blue Whale EV.
Thanks, guys. So just a little bit about us. Some of our slides that we use, we do repeat because we think it's important that you understand the perspective that we have. Blue Whale EV was designed really to be what I said earlier, an agnostic organization around the technology itself, but very, very consultative, right? And so our role in the process is really from end to end, and what we refer to, or as the industry refers to, as turnkey or make ready. So we're going to touch on a few of these things in just a bit, but you know, everything from the analysis to the considerations of return on investment to the selection of the devices, really uncovering the application, as we like to refer to it. The front end effort of dealing with the information gathering around, you know, does my facility have sufficient and adequate electrical power to run these devices? Who's our audience? Where do these things need to be placed, right? Design, engineering, electrical, construction. Blue Whale today is involved in every single piece of that. So I think the key takeaway for the About Us is really end to end, right? Working through and working with you on what it is that you'd like to see or do, and then ultimately resulting in a finished project, which we'll give you some examples of that to see as well. All right, so one of the things as we refer to this plan, this is a relatively new approach to the market. It's unique and somewhat proprietary to Blue Whale EV. We've developed something that we have found is a very important step, and we refer to it as a PSA as an acronym, but it stands for Professional Site Assessment. If you're looking for this plan, and it's only for budgetary purposes, or you're looking for this plan in order to create what many people refer to as kind of a phase one to this, we use this contract or this document to gather quite a number of things that will allow you to speak to all of the key elements of not only the adoption, the costs, whether or not we have to invite the utility in for additional power within the facility. We certainly address what rebates and incentives and grants and so forth are available. But in the end of this, what we've done is we've used this contract as a front-end device for us to, one, gather the information that's needed, and two, help for you to develop the plan that you're ultimately looking for, and essentially then go off to your organization and provide whoever those key decision makers are with an estimation of what the cost of this is going to be, along with the offsets or for what's available in the incentive and rebate market. So, you know, this type of information, again, could be provided to anyone, you know, whether Blue Whale EV is involved or not. These are all things that in the schedule of these various deliverables that we describe are required of any project that we get involved in, big, medium, or small. This is a slide that we continue to repeat. Most of our customers come to us as we start to talk about that plan, and they want to know what the steps are. They want to know what the timeline looks like. They want to know when it is that they should be prepared. So this phase one, phase two, phase three, all very critical to the overall plan. You can see there's a lot of time and effort put into the site planning and the prep. We then move on to phase two, which is the actual installation. This is a construction component really in phase two, and then the activation of the devices themselves. So we refer to that as the commissioning. Once the devices are installed and they're turned over to the key players of the organization, we take them through the software application that's associated with the device. We help them to configure it, and from that point, they are then providing energy to this either customer base, tenant base, employee base, whoever it is that the public, for example, whoever it is that's intended to use the actual EV charging devices. This isn't just a quick visual. People, I noticed we get a lot of likes and a lot of activity in social media when we publish photographs of spaces that we've completed. This is what a typical installation looks like. You know, in this example, it's 2 dual ports. This is an organization of about 100 employees. They wanted to start off with a phase 1 approach. Their employees are starting to adopt EV vehicles or PHEV vehicles that are plug-in. And they wanted to offer this not only as an amenity, but this particular client is using these as a public-facing device too for monetization. So you can see these devices went in. In this particular case, they are closely located to where the panel of the power source is provided. So as opposed to putting, you know, these devices in the front of the building, these folks in this case did not have necessarily a lot of customers visiting at this location. It was really designed more for the employees. So just again, a quick example of what all this might look like. We talk about this. People are getting super creative today with the adoption and the introduction of EV charging stations. This is something else that Blue Whale takes its customer through. If you're driving through progressive companies that are putting these devices in place, or you're showing up in one of their parking garages, you've probably seen images and signage and decorative touches to all the things that take place during the course of the project. Again, just another good visual aid for what this all might look like in the end of your plan and in the end of your project. Some of the customers that we get involved with, as you can see from these logos, many of these folks are household names. But the reason that we share this slide is for you to understand this is not an industry-specific thing. We are not working with the hospitality industry every day, and we're not working with multifamily and commercial real estate companies. It is across the board. The dynamic and the paradigm of this adoption is changing the way these businesses are functioning, the who it is that they're attracting, and the who it is that they ultimately end up supporting. So whether it's a hospital, it's a hotel, it's a retail center, it's a public sector facility, you can see that all of these logos are suggesting that the industries are really, really across the board. And we think this will continue. Some of those industries are a little more progressive maybe than others. But the idea is to really kind of suggest to you that as you're either considering EV as a form of transportation, or you're managing some form of company that's taken this sort of thing into consideration in the past, we will talk about that, right? We'll talk about the why and the how, ultimately in the plan, and then we'll move towards giving you the information that you need to help make a decision around your plan. All right, this next section, I'm going to turn over to our partner, Randy Ettman with Blink.
Thanks, Scott. Greatly appreciate that. And yeah, great information and a great segue into as we now start talking about the EV charging stations themselves. So one of the things, certainly, you know, as you look at from a product offering, and certainly what Blue Whale offers to clients is a very robust product offering, whether we're talking a residential type of application, or really kind of the sweet spot that we're talking about is the commercial application, where we have a whole host of products available from level 2, that are capable of producing up to 19.2 kilowatts. So great output on a level 2 device, all the way up to our DC fast charging products from a 30 kilowatt low end DC output, all the way up to 360 kilowatts on the high end DC fast chargers. So again, a variety of availability of products. So we have the right solution for the right application, and able to put a square peg into a square hole and a round peg into a round hole. And I think that is the greatest from that aspect of things. Again, as we kind of look at, the Blink family of products, as you can see, again, just a wide variety of products, both residential, commercial application, and then the DC application. So regardless of the vertical market that we're serving, as Scott mentioned, it is not just one particular vertical market, whether it's hospitality, whether it's commercial, whether it's multifamily. We've got the product. Blue Whale has the product to be able to offer for that specific application or specific vertical that we're focusing to. So again, just kind of really focusing on the portfolio in itself for a little bit. DC fast charging is certainly one that is talked about on a regular basis. And as you can see, a wide variety of product from that low end 30 kW wall mounted or pedestal mounted DC fast charger all the way up to 360 kW dispenser with power cabinet. So again, having the right product for the right solution, the right market is key. And that's what this provides to you. So one thing that goes along with the actual charging stations themselves is going to be that network support. That is really, in my opinion, kind of the heartbeat behind the solution in itself. With the network, this is where you as the station owner have the availability to be able to construct your pricing policy, provide access control policies, but then also have detailed analytics available to you from usage by individual transaction, usage in totality by a station or by a fleet application, or one of my favorites is really kind of the sustainability or environmental reports that you're going to get as part of your analytics. So whether you're looking for CO2 offset or fossil fuel reduction, a lot of communities, corporations want to know what is the impact this is having on our environment or on our community by deploying these EV charging stations. And through these analytics, you have the ability to be able to do that. And then also from an EV driver perspective, they'll have their own whole host of analytics available to them as well, such as their favorite charging stations that they frequently use, their usage. So again, this is kind of really the heartbeat behind that hardware that gives all that detailed analytics both to our station owners and to our EV drivers. So working with Blink, as I'd mentioned, being able to put the round peg in the round hole, the square peg into the square hole, along with having the right product offering and portfolio product offering, comes along with having the right business models for the right solution. And as you can see here, we have a variety of business models that can be offered to clients, from host-owned that want to have a purchase model to Blink as a service for subscription, or a hybrid or turnkey model to where these are either zero capex models or co-investment business models. But again, having the right solution for the right application, and that is what we have available to clients, and what Blue Whale has available to offer to you as clients. So as you can see, public charging, it is still, matters. Public chargers, would need to deliver more than 20% of the electricity consumed by electric vehicles by 2030. As we know, the vast majority of charging takes place either at home or at the workplace. And so having the need for chargers where individuals are going to be visiting, so whether it's workplace, whether it's on the go, retail destinations, those numbers will continue to climb as more and more vehicles are hitting the road and having a need or a demand for EV charging at, their frequently visited locations. So as we talked a little bit about, home and public charging, EV drivers who can't charge at home or at work, still need to use level 2 or DC fast chargers. And so this is just kind of giving you some costs as to what you may expect, either in a home application or out in the wild at public applications. So at home, roughly, you're looking at about 16 cents per kilowatt hour to charge your vehicle. So, as an EV driver, you're not going to see a significant increase in your electricity, bill by charging your vehicle at home. I myself an EV driver, and you don't really even notice that, to be quite honest with you. And then you get into the public level 2 and DC fast charger. This is typically what you can expect to pay at a public level 2, around 44 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the DC fast chargers around 59 cents per kilowatt hour is what you may typically see at those units out in the wild. So we're going to take a little bit of a look here at the EV market trends. This is one of the things that as we look at, providing that education approach with clients, not only do we want to talk about the equipment and the portfolio, but we also want to give you education on the market trends. So one of the things you'll see here, as we look at roughly 3.9% or 3.9 million EVs here in the US, or roughly 7% of all new cars sold by January 2023 were EVs. As we look at this chart and we see the trajectory, by the year 2030, we're going to be around 30% of all new vehicles sold are going to be EV. And that's only, 6 short years away that we're going to be hitting that trajectory. And so with that amount of vehicles, it is also going to be a direct pull through of the amount of charging stations that are going to be needed. So one of the things, in an approach with a client is to talk about, addressing the needs of today, but we also need to be planning out and looking at what that's going to look like in just 6 short years from now and talking about addressing the future. And so your parking lot as you know it today is going to look entirely different in just 6 short years. Those 5 or 6 EVs that are there currently could potentially be 15 or 20 EVs in just 6 short years. So in comparison, in comparing market trends, one of the things we look at is kind of, adoption rates in other parts of the globe. And as we can see here, we are very in line with trajectory in areas such as Norway, where they've actually are expected to have an adoption rate of near 90%. And so as you can see, the US, we are on a very similar trajectory. So we're going to continue to monitor and watch that. And that's, again, where the education aspect comes in, that as we work with clients, as Blue Whale works with clients, we like to be able to provide that data so you have the ability to make the best decision for your organization based on the industry trends that we see and understand. So you may ask, what's speeding up the EV adoption? Why are people, migrating to electric vehicles? Number one is the cost saving standpoint. It's about a third of the cost to operate an EV compared to a fossil fuel vehicle. So certainly a significant savings there as we see, prices at the gas pumps considerably increasing, month over month, year over year. From a performance standpoint, these vehicles are excellent with acceleration and torque. If you have not ever had the opportunity to either drive an EV or go for a ride in one, I highly recommend it. You'll be just amazed at the performance of these vehicles. Sustainability, obviously, reduction in the dependence on fossil fuels. So certainly, providing that green solution either for the community or for your household. And then the battery technology, there has just been considerable advancements in the battery technology as we've moved forward with the vehicles. We've seen an increase in the range of the vehicles, giving us the ability to go further and farther with the vehicles. And that is due to the change in the battery technology in itself.
Well, thank you, Randy. I'll take it up from here. I appreciate the insight into all of the variety of charging options people have if they go with Blink, and also the insight into what the trends in the market are doing right now. I'm going to take us a step back and look first at some of the EV charging basics, just to get everybody up to speed with that. And then I'll move into some of the rebates and how we might look at funding some of these projects. So to kick us off first, let's just look at the different types of electric vehicles that are out there. So for those of you that have been driving EV, you're probably very familiar with this slide. But for those of you who may be new to this, these are the 3 types of EV vehicles that are out there right now. That we are seeing a lot of. So you've got your hybrid electric vehicle or HEV. These are non-plug-in type vehicles that are charged through braking technology. And they also have a component that is still using an ICE or internal combustion engine as in addition to the battery. Beyond that, the next step is your plug-in hybrid vehicles. These use a combination of the ICE as well as the ability to plug in and charge for a limited amount of time. Typically, the charge component or the battery is about 30 to 60 miles on a lot of these plug-in hybrids, and then the majority of your driving is still done through your internal combustion engine. Then you look at what we truly call an EV or a battery EV, which is the BEV. This is a fully electric vehicle that does not use any gasoline, and they rely 100% on the capability to have access to a charging station in order to function. From here, we'll look a little bit about, what is the process like if I'm driving an EV? How am I looking at mitigating that buzzword we hear all the time of charge anxiety, right? So it's a change in the way that we look at filling our vehicle up. You're no longer waiting until you get to, 20, 15, 10 miles left in your car, you're capping off as you drive your vehicle every day. So the way that people are doing that is they're primarily charging at home and at work, and then they've got access to stations along the road if they're traveling long distance, or if there's an emergency, they maybe forgot to plug in the night before, or they've got to travel somewhere that they weren't expecting to go. From here, we'll talk a little bit about the funding programs that are out there right now and how you look at trying to fund your program or your project. So really the way that we go about looking at these available incentives that are out there is to look at grants, rebates, and tax credits that may be applicable for your project. Typically, we're looking at one of three and potentially all three of these options for your projects. The federal incentives that may be out there, the state incentives that may be available in your specific state, and then any local or utility programs that may be available either through your county or through your local provider of electricity. So the one that I'll briefly touch on is the federal rebate, because that is across the United States right now. As of 2023, they did make a new requirement that you have to fall what's in one of these eligible census tracts in order to be able to get 6% of your project back. Beyond that, each state and each utility company has a wide array of available incentives and programs that are out there. If you are interested in moving forward with a project and are curious about what incentives may be there, Blue Whale is able to help take a look at these for you, identify any that may be there, and provide any of the information that you need in order to apply for and potentially obtain these funding incentives. From there, we'll look briefly at the funding programs that are out across the United States. You can see the majority of the United States have robust programs that are available. I'll leave this slide up for just a second so you can glance through. But one that I would bring up just as a unique opportunity is in Maryland. We have the BGE rebate, which is now available, that is paying you per port that you put in at your locations. So the nice thing is if you go out and you get a dual port charger, you're going to get a rebate for two for the cost of essentially installing one charger. So a nice benefit there. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about DC laying out some options for funding in the next 4 years. It's come to the attention of those that are involved with decision making around EV that there's just not enough EV chargers out there for the demand of EV vehicles today. So if we look at what's going on there, you see city leaders are hoping to grow the number by 30 times, proposing that there will be 7,500 charging stations across all 8 wards of DC by 2027. As of right now, they have about 250 electric vehicle charging stations. That can show you that there, just over the next few years, is going to be a large push towards getting EV charging stations put in, not only in DC, but across the board. One other piece that I would mention is that for new construction, we're seeing that there are new stipulations being put in place. Somewhere between 10 and 20% of all parking spaces will have to be EV accessible. So for anyone that's looking at building new parking lots, putting in new parking garages, considering building a new multifamily property, EV is something that's going to have to be considered as part of these analysis. And that's something that Blue Whale EV can come in and help you do through the tools that Scott mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the professional services agreement. With that, I think I'm going to take us to our FAQs. I'll turn it back over to Scott to quickly run through these, and we'll open it up to any questions that may be out there for today.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'll run through what some of the most common questions are that come into us. But if you have something in mind and you'd like us to answer it, we try to leave about 20 minutes in these series to answer questions. So either host something in the chat, feel free to put it in the Q&A, which is either at the bottom or the top if you're unfamiliar with Zoom. Pretty easy to do, and we'll give you a response. If you don't feel like you want to publish a question within the webinar, feel free to reach out to any one of us directly. So questions are in an abundance, right? For the adoption of EV charging. So we see a lot of things that the customer is curious about. Randy touched on, some of what is traditional around charging costs. He also talked about, a variety of different type of devices. That's all part of what we consider to be the application. Who is it that we're trying to support? And then eventually getting into that selection process of determining what type of device makes sense for that application. We have, within that trajectory that Randy provided as well, I think the eventuality is that we are really, really moving towards having, somewhere in a neighborhood in the next several years, 3 and 4 and 5 of all vehicles out of 10, being some form of an EV. And Nick described that, in today's environment, there are multiple types of EVs. So most of our clients, I think I mentioned it earlier, they don't come to us necessarily as an expert in the industry. The person within the company that owns the project is an enthusiast. They're coming at it from the environmental side. They're in a facilities role. They drive EV, and they've just volunteered, right, to be the person that is going to introduce this into their company. Most of the enthusiasts are also an individual who's wanting others in their organization to adopt, right? And so they might be spearheading the project for that reason. But Nick mentioned to you, while the majority of all the charging today occurs generally at the resident, there is a significant push as the EV chargers become more available in the businesses that we support and at our work. That paradigm will start to shift away from what we do at home with charging to that of what we might do at work or places that we choose to visit. So here's a few of the FAQs. How does the electric car work? People are not familiar, and these are the questions that get presented a lot of times at the dealer. But as people are going through the consideration of changing from what they did in the past to what they intend to do around EV, this question comes up pretty often. What does it cost to charge an electric car? Randy touched on that a little bit. It's almost nominal at the residential level, but I will go on to say there's a trade-off, right? And so you saw what the minimal amount was for per kilowatt hour in a resident. The difference is that there's a time to charge, right? And so those devices that Randy mentioned that are referred to as DC devices, they charge much more quickly. In certain cases, a half an hour or 20 minutes is typically where the time frame is that people will be on these devices. L2 devices, to get to that 80% of charge, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 to 5 hours or so. Residentially, people know that they're going to be, sleeping and that they're going to be resting at their home. Most people don't give much consideration as to the time because they're planning to be at home throughout the evening. They're gonna plug in and they're gonna go from there. What is the cost to implement these chargers? Well, that's hard for us to answer today, but if you go back to something that I mentioned earlier in the conversation, we're using that professional site assessment document, or PSA as we refer to it, to get to that understanding of what that total cost might be. And then within that PSA document, we will provide information around the available incentive and rebates. We get asked the question all the time, what are the available rebates? People are thinking, is the time to do this now because there's such a great incentive for me to offset the capital investment? The answer is yes. The majority of our projects today are offset by at least 50% by a rebate. And in certain cases, depending upon the location of the facility and a number of other variables, we've seen projects that are offset upwards of 80 and 90%. Then, of course, there's this consideration of, if I choose to put these devices in place and I establish a cost per kilowatt hour, how is it that I'm going to have income, right, from these devices? How many parking spaces should we consider? Again, all part of the application and what we go through within the PSA. Do we future-proof the site and roll them out over 5 years? Well, if we're going to come through as Blue LEV and bust up the parking lot and have to put conduit in all sorts of different places, we might only introduce in phase 1 4 or 5 or 6 plugs. but we're anticipating having to add more later. So how do we accommodate that? How do we incur that cost up front and not have to go through this continuation of disruption to our parking lots or our parking spaces? What can we do up front to sort of plan for the future? Will the EV chargers work in parking garages? The answer is, if you're unfamiliar, these devices are really in some ways an IT solution. So what I mean by that is there's a connectivity and a network component. Obviously, in certain cases, particularly within parking garages, they can be inoperable if we're not putting things like boosters in place, right, to strengthen that network capability. So yes, the devices work very well in the parking garages, but there may be things that we need to do to ensure that the networking component is viable and sustainable. Is this a new way to generate revenue, or will we lose money? Well, there's always, with anything, there's a capital cost. Thinking about the rebate and the grants, there's an offset to that capital expense, and then potentially there's an income source that gets produced from these devices. The other thing is we can't really put a price on a lot of the applications we do. We use the term amenity. And if you're making your employees happier and you're providing these type of devices for the early EV adopters, and they're thrilled that they now can charge it in a multifamily type of situation, or they can start charging at work. This might be just another amenity that you're providing to your employees that gets them excited about wanting to be at work, right? So with so many companies struggling today over this remote work and soon to come back and attempt to try to define all of that, EV charging stations could be one of those many things that helps people to consider, the coming back to work more easily than if they didn't have the device. Will my tenants incur the cost to implement the devices? This is kind of all over the place. What I would say about this is we would work through that plan. Generally, this is not a decision that's made by an individual. It might be through the course of an HOA, or it's a consortium of Blue Whale experts and our customers' experts to try to decide, who is it that's going to pick up this cost. Does EV charging help to attract new tenants? It certainly does. We are working today with some of the most significant real estate and property management companies where they are approaching Blue Whale EV and retrofitting quite a number of their new spaces. So we're doing this work for existing tenants, but we're also doing it for spaces that are either intended to newly come online, so new construction, but also to outfit the space so that when a tenant comes to those facilities, one of the differentiators could simply be, hey, they already have chargers and we've got multiple people driving EVs, right? So the answer is yes, for sure. How long does it take to implement the devices? A lot of this timeline is truly associated with the application and the scale and the scope of the project. So it's difficult for me to respond to you now with an answer to that, but through that PSA process, timeline is something that becomes a part of that deliverable. What are the power requirements on my property? Again, this is a question that does come up quite often. The power requirements are obviously tied closely to the number and type of devices that are intended to be put in. There are a lot of new load sharing capabilities that are part of these multiple implementations, and we would go through all that through the course of that PSA engagement. Will the construction be considerable and disruptive? Most of the time, it's really not. If you're unfamiliar with the efficiency of implementing EV chargers, generally what we want to do is to get them as close to the panel as possible. If that's not a possibility, then obviously, we're going to be a little more disruptive in the construction process. We're going to have to trench. We're going to have to take, longer lines of power from where those panels are currently. And we're going to make an attempt to get those chargers in the places that you all might feel are most suitable for the application that you're describing. So again, these are some of the questions that are being presented to us based on this specific topic around how do we create a plan and what do we do next. We could go on and on and on. This 4-part series, I think we've ended, with a slide that talks specifically around FAQs. the list is long, and that's really what Blue LEV does in the beginning of all of our projects, is we attempt to address the questions. And unfortunately, or fortunately, as a result of addressing the questions, we get a lot more. And so by the time our clients are ready to move forward, they've been well informed as to what this process would look like. And we've provided any number of recommendations for how it is they should expect to operate these devices moving forward. So I don't know if there's anything that's come into the Q&A, or if there's anything in the chat, and that's fine. If there's not, we can give you back a couple minutes. We will be on the path of continuing this commitment for education and awareness. We'll make the efforts to try and identify the most popular topics. Some of what we're planning to do next is begin to talk a little bit more around the vertical applications. Industry verticals is essentially what I'm referring to. And as the industry evolves, which it seems to be doing every day, it's an exciting industry to be in because of its emergence. It's a challenging industry to be in because what you knew last week may not be relevant for what you need to know this week. And that's where I think Blue LEV stays ahead of the industry, and its changes and makes every attempt possible to describe what it is that's happening currently, and also to be able to try and provide recommendations for what we see happening in the future. So really the intent behind the webinars are to take what we do every day and just share that with an audience of folks that are intended to move in this direction. So hopefully you found this to be effective for questions that you might have had. Feel free to reach out to either Nick and or myself with anything that you might have, questions, projects, processes, considerations, whatever it might be, and we will make our best effort to get back with you immediately. So Randy, thank you for joining us.
My privilege and pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know you had some time involved, I think, in our first part of this 4-part series. So we appreciate the time and all the things that Blink has continued to do for us and our customers. So if there's not any questions, like I said, we'll give you back a few minutes, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you again for taking the hour and spending it with Blue LEV.